Hello, this is Dr. St. John, and today I'm going to explain how and why and where we want to use relative versus absolute addressing in our decision models. So I took all the formulas out. This is the Blue Ridge hot tubs problem that you can find on page 47, and I'm going to real quick enter them back in. A review won't hurt. Equal, all formulas start with an equal, and in this case, my objective coefficient $350, which is the amount of profit associated with each X1 I sell. That's cell B6 equals B6 times B5. That's a decision variable, plus C6 times C5. Okay, so that formula is in there. Now my constraints over here. I'm on the left-hand side of the formula. Again, recall that the constraints are in terms of the decision variables. So as before, equals 1 times, that's the 1 associated with X1. Column B is all in reference to X1. B8 times B5 plus C8 times C5. Now, this formula, I want to copy it down because each constraint is on a separate row. So as I copy it down, I just want those pointers there, by pointers I mean the reference to the cells on the left, in this case B8 to C8. On the next row, I want it to reference B9 and C9, and then B10 and C10 and B11 and C11 and so on. That's obviously those are going to be relative addresses. However, the reference to the decision variables, all these constraints are in terms of decision variables. So the reference to B5 and C5 in this formula, I don't want that moving because otherwise it'll change to B6 and C6, which are numbers, and then B7 and C7, which there's nothing in there. It'll assume zeros, so I'll get garbage. I want to make the reference to B5 and C5 an absolute reference so that I can copy it down. So earlier we did a formula in each row. In this case, I don't want to do that. I want to be lazy. I want to make the formula one time. That's one reason I have my constraints organized together so that I can do the formula once and then just copy it down. As long as I make the relative and absolute references correctly, I'll be fine. So C5, I want that an absolute reference. I'm using F4. And the other one is B5. I want to make that an absolute reference. So now B8 is a relative address, B5 is an absolute, C8 is a relative, and C5 is an absolute. And that's what I want. I can take my formula, grab in lower right-hand corner, grab the fill handle, pull it down, done. Now, let's make sure it works. I'm going to click on cell D6, go to Data, go to Solver. Let's see, Set Objective. Normally it puts it in there. Let's just click on there, D6, Maximize, Changing Variables. Those are going to be my yellow here. I always put them in yellow. Subject to the constraints, let's add them. Let's see, on the left-hand side, I can add these first three together since the sign does not change. Less than or equal to, right-hand side is going to be these three. Add the next one. These two, sign doesn't change, so I can add them together. Click OK. Make sure simplex LP, linear programming is selected. Check make unconstrained variables non-negative. We don't need it because we put those constraints in there, but we don't need those constraints in our model. And then hit solve. Found a solution. Looks good. So that's why, and that's where and how I want to use relative and absolute references in my models. Later we'll also be using, it'll also be important with the decision variables, but again, another reason that I put all the decision variables together and all the constraints together. So, and I must, in my formulas, use relative addressing when necessary and use absolute addressing when necessary, and that's how and why. Thank you.